Hey guys, what's going on? Shah here, and today we're back with another video, this time jumping into a Theater of Pain, Mythic plus 20 on a Spiteful Volcanic week, so actually like the week that I'm actually recording this video. This was recorded. I'm just going to be talking over the kind of the general things that are going on in the key, down from composition to the tactical plays that my group made, things you need to prioritize in certain fights, whether it's trash or bosses, as well as some cool like tips and tricks in the dungeon and things not to do, which we'll definitely discover in this dungeon. This isn't my first time 20 in theater, but what I like about this recording or this route that we did is that it's very like pug friendly, is that this is kind of what normal pugs run, or at least what I've seen in groups. So you don't need any kind of weird skip strats. You don't need like a rogue or invis pots for this. All you have to simply do is brute force your way through the dungeon, and it ends up actually kind of working out in your favor. So I'm gonna go through the things that my group did right, what we did wrong, and hopefully you guys can learn something from this video. So let's just dive right in. So first things first, let's just quickly talk about the composition of the group. We are running a fairly heavy melee cleave here. We're running Windwalker Monk, Havoc Demon Hunter, as well as a Holy Paladin, which typically plays in melee, as well as like obviously the tank being Guardian Druid. I'm going to be in melee as well. So we're going to bring a lot of like pretty good burst damage, but also fairly good sustain, especially because we're playing with a BM Hunter as well. Yes, you heard me right, that we are playing a BM Hunter in this key. Sakai wanted to test it out. It actually does pretty good consistent damage compared to the typical marksman burst damage. So all in all, like this is going to be a pretty good group for some of the pulls we're going to do here. So the one thing that I recommend not doing in a Theater of Pain run, especially if you're pugging, and I mean, if you're in any coordinated group, you can do this, but what we're doing here is we're pulling all of the trash at the start of the dungeon onto the first boss, because the first boss really isn't that deadly, especially in the early phases of the fight. And because if you essentially, like, the boss is essentially just glorified trash anyways, so if you're able to group them all together and use big cooldowns, so obviously things like Zuen, Heroism, as well as Wild Spirits and Metamorphosis, along with Incarnation, Ashen Hollow, all of these cooldowns together with Hero mean these mobs die within the first 30 seconds of the fight anyways, long enough for Incarnation to keep me alive. I'm right now healing 8.5k HPS, Egg is healing another 5.5k HPS, and we're all in a very healthy state. There are some weeks you can't do this on though, so things like Sanguine make this fairly difficult to do. Bursting makes it kind of sketchy if the Raging Bloodhorn goes off at a bad time. Inspiring makes it difficult because you can't get any kicks. And there's like one other, I think Bolstering. Bolstering will obviously bolster up the boss and make it horrible. So you can always split the trash packs up into separate pulls and then do the boss separately. But for our group, we just think that it's better and more efficient to just pull everything together. Now, keep in mind it is comp specific. If you don't have a soothe for that Raging Bloodhorn when he's doing his tantrum, it's going to add a lot of group damage onto your group, where either people need to use defensives, immunities, or the healer just needs to absolutely be a Chad pumper. So keeping all that in mind, this isn't something you'll typically see in any pug group, but in a coordinated group, you can definitely do this and pull it off if you have the right coordination. So when it comes to soothing, Guardian Druids, Hunters, and Rogues with Shiv can all do this, but Rogues have a little bit more difficult time just because of like the poison. I'm pretty sure they have to have a certain poison on, and on top of that, like it's a longer cooldown. So I don't think a Rogue can hit every Raging Bloodhorn, but if I'm incorrect about that, let me know. I haven't been playing with a Rogue a lot lately, and typically they never Shiv because I would always take care of the soothes. So first boss goes down like 2 minutes. So 2 minutes, we got all the trash plus the boss. So this, all it does is it gives us a little bit more time in the dungeon to either wait for cooldowns or just more time on certain bosses, because sometimes we're blowing a lot of cooldowns on trash before a boss, and then when we get to a boss, we're completely dry, and the boss just takes a little bit longer, despite it being fortified weak. So heading down into the dungeon, what we always like to do is go into the Halls of Might. Halls of Might is the dual boss. The reason for this is typically because of just how Prideful works in this dungeon. So if you pull this, you're going to get Prideful after the like second champion, and then you're going to get it right before boss. And then if you continue pulling like this, you're typically going to get a Prideful before every boss going forward. Maybe with the skip if you want to, and then you can back pull, but this is just the easiest thing for us to do. We also like to have Hero for a little bit bigger pull, and since cooldowns were up, this is like the most effective pack to pull. So do be careful about these conscripts. They do kind of nasty damage to your group. They apply a nasty bleed. This is really just for the healer to worry about, and if you do have cooldowns going into this, just making sure you're killing them as fast as possible. And there's a lot of things about the different contenders in here. So in this video, we're pulling Dokig, the Brutalizer. He does a Savage Flurry, and I've talked about this before, but this guy is better for tanks who can block or parry, because block and parrier has a little bit higher chance than dodge, and dodge also has a diminishing return. So when he's doing this, it's technically like an auto attack. You're actually only going to dodge like the first one or two, and then every other hit's going to be direct, and it does a lot of damage. And sometimes you just can't have mitigation up for it if you're a Guardian Druid, because of if you're rage starved. So essentially what I'm getting down to is, if you can avoid getting this guy, try to. Supposedly if you walk in the room at the right time, or past that like threshold, you can trigger whichever one is attacking will kill the one when you pass that threshold. So you can control it, supposedly. I've tried playing with it, but I can never get it right. Sometimes it's random, I feel like, but that's just the one big thing about Dokig, is if you do happen to pull him, just make sure like you're rotating through your bark skins, your survival instincts, as well as any other appropriate tank cooldown if you're not playing a Guardian Druid. So a lot of these guys do end up casting this Ricocheting Blade. There's this, I never pronounce her name right, but I think it's Harugia, the Bloodthirsty, as well as another one in the next pack is also going to cast this Ricocheting Blade. It can be line of sighted like you see Sakai doing here, which it completely avoids the damage. It'll typically always be cast on a range player. That's why he's always baiting over here, except in this run specifically, he was having a little bit of an issue getting out, where he was just like in an awkward spot, and by the time he got over here, it would still go on him. So he just wasn't in the right position. But you can LOS that, which saves your healer and you a lot of your defenses, which you're probably going to need for the next pull. The next pull is sketchy, mainly because it does a lot of group damage, and there's an aura that the captain puts out that makes the mobs take 75% reduced area of effect damage. And because of this, a lot of things like wild spirits and stuff like that are going to be significantly reduced in damage because of this aura. So why I said this route's nice is because you're going to get Prideful here for that next pull. Now, you can skip this pull. I've seen a lot of groups do it. In my best Theater of Pain run, we ended up skipping this with Invis Pots. It is a viable option, but again, sometimes when you're pugging, or if you're cheap, sometimes you have to pull certain packs. And in this case, like, it's doable, but you have to commit a lot of things to it. So we have Prideful. We're going to have some of our bigger cooldowns up. We're saving things like Wild Spirits and Zuen, as you can see in our party frames here. As well as that, we're going to have things like Wing, Ashen Hollows, and Aura Mastery all for this pull, which I think we end up using most of it. So if you're going to do this pull on a high fortified week, make sure you have cooldowns up for it. So Pride's going to go down here, and as you notice, you can see that our BM Hunter is actually doing a lot of single target damage. This is just because of the way that the class is designed with its current legendary, and Bestial Wrath being like a 1 minute cooldown essentially. So BM Hunters are still viable. Unlike Marksman, they don't have as much burst damage, but with Wild Spirits active, as well as some of their other cooldowns, they can actually pack quite a punch. I think he's not even the lowest overall in this dungeon at the end, which is kind of dope. So this next pull, again, really scary. Captain needs to die priority, like always, and make sure you kick his Demoralizing Shout. This could typically be done by one player, and with cooldowns, they should obviously die. And then again, Spiteful, like on any Spiteful week, you have to find a way to get through or wait for them to die. What our group typically always does is we pull mobs back a little bit. Spiteful dies, and right as they're all dying, we run through and then root them. You know, you see the Ring of Peace here up on the top of the screen, and then we're on to Rack the Harden. Rack the Harden is the easier version of this. It's mostly going to be kind of like a steady, consistent damage compared to burst damage as you're going to get from the other mob here. I think Advent Nevermore, I think, is the name of that mob. So Wreck is going to be better if you can get the option between the two. I recommend doing that. Again, you have to pass that threshold while that mob that you want to pull is attacking. If the other one's attacking, whoever's attacking is going to die, essentially is how it's supposed to work, or how I've heard it described. But again, I can never pull it off. I don't know how to do it. You know, I'm in the pace of the dungeon, so I just kind of want to pull. So in the case of like doing 20s, we can kind of risk doing that. And, you know, it worked out in our favor this time. So pretty much step out of Whirlwind. I guess I will just say that, like, my face being right above my face is kind of funny. So these mobs do take a little bit of time to get down, and that's actually a big reason why Sakai decided to play BM in this run as well, because that consistent single target damage is really going to amplify our ability to get Pridefuls down at an appropriate speed, as well as some of these like mini boss mobs. There's a lot of pulls in here where you're only pulling 1 or 2 targets or 3 targets, and sometimes cooldowns like aren't that effective if they're not going to be really big pulls. So Marksmanship Hunter shines with burst damage. BM Hunter shines with that consistent damage, like I keep saying. We do have a fairly good cleave here as well. Me being mainly physical, Aegon as Paladin being kind of a split, as well as Sakai and Dave bring a lot of physical damage. We're also going to get that physical damage buff from Dave. So we just have like kind of a power comp right now. We're really empowering all schools of magic, both physical and then obviously magical spells. So something you might have seen me do, but you're going to see me do in the next boss fight, is off heal. There's a lot of opportunities in this dungeon in particular to off heal as a druid tank, because there's just windows where you can go out of bear form for like 5-10 seconds and just, you know, cast healing. Now, a lot of players like to play Night Fae, as I've expressed in previous videos. So, and something else that I've expressed is that I don't play Night Fae. So I play Venthyr, so I have better damage and healing windows, but I don't have like this RNG, you know, barrage of spells that I can cast every 2 minutes. But with that being said, I kind of played this more old school style of druid, where I'm going to be kind of doing a little bit more weaving that's going to benefit the group when it comes to healing and not so much damage. So typically after these brutal combos and the banners being killed, when he's doing his Might of Maldraxxus, when he's doing his like 3-hit combo, the different versions of AoE abilities, whether it's the frontal, the cone, or the circle, I'm going to actually be going out of form, you know, casting a Rejuve on the lowest player, casting a Swiftmend on the lowest player, and then Wild Growthing. So you'll see me do it here. I target Zev, I put a Rejuve on him, and then I cast a Wild Growth, and then I decide to Swiftmend and Rejuve Dave. And then I go back into bear form. And because of this, if you notice my healing in that lower right-hand corner, is my healing on this fight is actually going to sustain around like that 4k mark. And I'm actually going to do a lot of the healing, the carrying. Egg didn't even actually have to use Ashen Hollow here. I think he just did it as actually like a damage cooldown, just to make sure the banner's dying, but also to push this boss to a point where we need to. Because again, dungeons are, you know, all about speed. So if you're using cooldowns on cooldown, they're more than likely going to be more beneficial than holding cooldowns for a different pull. So if it's coordinated, you can definitely like hold cooldowns if you know it's okay, and you know we're gonna be done with this boss in a couple seconds. I'm gonna hold this cooldown and then use it on the next pull. But in this case, it was like, okay, Ashen Hollow is definitely gonna be worth throwing down here. It lasts for 30 seconds. It's gonna be effective damage, and then we can keep moving on through the dungeon. So one thing to note, like I'll have to do a guide on this. I plan on doing a guide on all the bosses still, but this guy, when it comes to who goes down and who gets to kill who, it's really going to come down to who can kill who the fastest. It doesn't matter who has cooldowns up. You just want to get out of that phase so you can get the banner down, because if you don't get the banner down in time, you're going to create kind of a problem in the near future for your entire group on getting out of those frontals, because the banner doesn't die. So now that we're done with Halls of Might, we're finishing this hall, or this wing at 41%. We still don't plan on really skipping much, and we typically, after this, because we have Hero up, and we have Wild Spirits, and we have Zuen, no Metamorphosis though, and no Ashen Hollow, because of the cooldowns that we have available, we're actually going to pull this entire room with Hero. At least that was the plan. We end up not heroing here because we actually literally just forgot. We were like, yeah, we're going to hero this. We pulled it, and then no one heroed, or lusted, or whatever you want to call it. So the big thing that you always want to notice, or you always want to look out for in this room when pugging, this is a pull you probably shouldn't do while pugging, and the reason being is because there are two very, very important kicks that if you miss, not only is your group probably going to wipe, but even if you guys do survive, you're all going to be doing 40% less damage if you miss both. So it's from these Blighted Sludge Spewers. I marked one with orange. It's kind of hard to see in this video now that I've pulled. There's one marked with orange and there's one marked with star. There's two of them if you're pulling this entire room. It'll typically be the first cast by star and the second cast by orange. And it's like a 2-second cast, and if it goes off, it does a burst of, I think it's plague damage. And it's also going to make everyone in the group have a 30-second debuff that makes you do 20% less damage and 20% less healing. Obviously, in a point where you need to be doing a lot of damage to a lot of mobs, having a damage reduction, or having like literal damage, you know, you're dealing less damage, is not going to be beneficial. Also, the burst of damage is going to be hard to recover from, because now you're doing less healing as well. So just assigning 2 kicks, typically the tank can always get one, and then 1 melee or 1 range, whoever's going to have a easier time getting it. If you can assign that somehow, definitely something to look out for. As a tank player, I like to always focus the back one, and I let a melee get the front one, because they're going to try to go in and start, you know, doing all their setup for their cooldowns. So because they're already focusing on damage, I just have, you know, I called out in this situation, I called for Dave to make sure he has the kick on it, and I just covered the back one. It wasn't an issue. And this is why I love Incarn, because I'm doing 7.3k healing, and Egg doesn't really have to do much here because most of the damage is going to go onto the tank, and if the tank uses their cooldowns appropriately, this room is kind of a joke to pull off, because you're just going to be able to blow it all up extremely quickly. The nice thing about this room is only 4 of the like 20 mobs you're pulling actually spawn Spiteful, so it's pretty easy to recover from, or you can actually stay in longer and make sure you're getting effective DPS in. So Dave obviously popped off like well above 20k, and some of our other DPS did a fairly good job as well. But again, we forgot to hero, so now we have to try to figure out when to hero. So this is a good pull to hero if you're doing the full room, because it's going to be effective. You can also chain it into the next pull. So even if you kill it well before hero actually fully expires, you still have time to continue pulling. What we end up doing here is holding it for Gore Chop. This is a dungeon where you can get essentially 4 heroes off if you use every hero on cooldown as soon as it comes up. But sometimes it's a little bit better to hold that hero or that lust, especially if that window is so tight, just for certain bosses or certain packs you're going to struggle with. This next pack, same thing. There's 2 Sludge Spewers. You have to kick that Withering Discharge. If Withering Discharge goes off, your group's probably going to wipe, or at least be really mad, because all their cooldowns are now wasted and all their damage is going to be doing less. Something that you don't want in a key. You don't want to be doing less damage in a key. It's never a good thing. You're up against a timer. You're trying to get trash down effectively. Make sure you're kicking. So as melee, like as a DPS, you can call out your marker, call out what you're assigning, and just always stick to that marker. If you have an auto marker, great. If not, you can always get one from, I think, Wago, and I think some add-ons do it. I just don't know which add-ons off the top of my head. And then lastly, this Butcher, this Devour Flesh cast, when it goes off and it hits the tank, that mob is going to heal for the damage it does, or a portion of the damage it does. So you can interrupt this by stunning it, or by using a paralysis or a blind or a gouge or whatever you can. That time we didn't stun it just because we were probably dry on them. It looks like leg sweep was down, ring was down. Yeah, we didn't really have much for it. And then lastly, skipping around this guy you can do when he reaches the end of his pat. I guess I could back this up a bit. Let me try to do that. So we backed up a little bit. This guy patrols around this room in like a semicircle. He goes up to the entrance of the room, and he pats. We'll see if we can get it here. So he pats to here. Oh, wow, that's horrible. Can I back this up by frame? All right, I messed that up. We backed up a little bit. I slowed this down to about 60% speed. So as you can see, he's patrolling around the room. You can keep a distance here. A lot of pugs know this. I'm just going to go over it just in case you guys don't know this. So you don't need a Shrouder. You don't need an Invis here. You can wait till he reaches the end of his pat, which is just about there when he stops moving. And then you can run through here and hug that right-hand side. If you're going to the other side, it's the same thing, but you know, mirrored. So you're going to hug the left-hand side, and you can just simply run past. It's a pretty easy to pull off. Just got to use your head. Use them common senses. So we're going to jack this back up to 100% speed and then go in. Again, 1 Sludge Spewer here plus 1 of the Butchers. Make sure you're kicking the Sludge Spewer on the Withering Discharge. They only cast it once every like 20 seconds, so 1 melee DPS can typically take care of this. And then if you can, make sure you're stunning that Butcher's forget the name of it, the Putrid Butcher's Devour Flesh. There we go. I was like just talking about it too. So the first one we Nova'd, and the next one I think we're holding leg speed for. No, it went off, but that's all right. He got a big chunk of healing there, but we end up killing it. So it's okay if it goes off. It's just sometimes I've seen like 3 or 4 of them go off in a pull because the DPS is low, and then the mob is just alive forever. So essentially it's like a mini DPS check. This is always a tight spot for Prideful with this route though. Especially with the Spitefuls like spawning like right offside the screen here. What we did is we ringed and then we mass rooted. And this allows us to have a little bit of time just to wait for them to die off. And then we pull him out a little bit. It's just kind of scary with the pat. So when you're in this tight corner, make sure the person with Prideful is standing still, like I clipped there, and everyone else can move around and shuffle around to the appropriate position. Prideful is nice here. So there's a few things you can do. You can either take this Pride, skip to boss, you know, using a Shroud, using Invis Pots, and then you can back pull after you kill the boss, or you can pull more in the next wing, just depending. So there's a little bit of fluctuation with the route here that you can do. Because we have Ashen Hollow up, we're going to have Zuen and Wild Spirits and Metamorphosis up for this next pull, and I have Incarnation up. This is a pull that we can actually get to be pretty big. So I'm going to pop Incarn. There is a Sludge Spewer. There's one that comes out of the wall. That Withering Discharge, always the first cast, and then it's going to be like every like 15 or 20 seconds or so. And then just watch your feet as these ads die because they're going to spawn poop all over the ground. And what my group does is we actually then chain into the next pull. Because we didn't have all of our offensive cooldowns up, I didn't chain right away. But if we were a little bit slower just because it was a higher key level, we would have all our cooldowns up for this pull as well as Ashen Hollow. These big guys here, the gas bags, are really, really sketchy. And you're typically going to need several healing cooldowns for. A lot of people like to skip as many of them as possible, but because we had Ashen Hollow up, it wasn't going to be an issue. Egg was healing 10k HPS, and I was also healing 6k HPS. But so again, it looks like it's going well, but we're using a lot of cooldowns in a coordinated fashion here to make sure we're getting the pull down effectively. So Prideful's just ended right now, about a minute into the pull, and we're finishing this off. So these last two mobs, I've actually pulled into boss before, but because Spiteful week and being a fairly heavy melee comp, I wanted to refrain from doing this specifically this week. So we ring a piece on the door, which is really nice on Spiteful weeks because, you know, it completely blocks off that entrance, and we pull the boss. So again, I'm going to be doing a boss guide on this in the near future again. This boss is fairly straightforward. There's a tank buster mechanic, and there's ads that spawn, as well as you have to dodge the chains on the wall that are coming down. What some people don't know about these ads is that they actually work very similar to Spiteful. You actually don't need to kill them, and over time they kill themselves. So if you're smart, you can actually CC them with a lot of different things like paralysis, blind, roots, frozen trap. Frozen trap's a little bit harder to land, but they are undead, so you can't use things like polymorph or anything like that. But if you actually, so we get a paralysis here, and then Egg actually gets a turn evil without anyone damaging it somehow. I don't know how he pulled this off. We're actually baffled. So if you see, they're off here in Africa just dying. They're just losing health, and eventually they will just flat out die. And what's nice about doing this strategy is this poop that they drop when they die is now not going to be in the encounter area, so melee just have more space to stand. And again, another reason why BM hunters are so great on this in this dungeon is specifically for this fight. They don't have to worry about anything. They can constantly move and do damage at anywhere in the room. So how the chains work essentially in the ads is two ads will always come down with the chains. They always come down where the openings are, and then CCs will typically line up every other ad set. So I normally mass root every other. There's a paralysis there. I'm holding mass root because I wasn't in range of the other one, so I'm just holding it at this point. And we're gonna just kill it, hopefully near the other pools. And then the big thing here is like trying to get the pools to be kind of stacked is what I like to do, so I can kind of rotate around them. Some groups like to try to keep them to the sides of the room, you know, either end where the chains don't spawn. But honestly, just kill ads when you can, and wherever the poop is, just move the boss away so melee have an appropriate amount of space. Outside of that fight, or outside of like all the mechanics, this fight kind of sucks. The uptime that melee and range have is fairly low, so that's why we ended up holding hero for this boss. And some groups like to have prideful, because the faster you get this boss down, the less time you have to spend just literally walking around a room full of chains, and more time, you know, pushing through the dungeon and killing trash. So hero is pretty effective here, and our overalls our single target overalls are actually pretty high, so 6.3, 5.6, and 5.3 ending that fight. So we finish this wing, and we're heading up to the Altars of Agony. So one thing to note is that I didn't mention this in the last haul, but we do have... Do I have like a paintbrush thing here? Oh, that's not what I want to do. There we go. So, why are you doing this? So, we have Maldraxx's banner right here to the right. This one's kind of hard to see, and the one in the last wing is right when you enter the wing, the Hall of Conquest. You're gonna see the banner in like underneath the boss platform. You can either grab it before or after you kill the boss. Like when I say before the boss, you grab it as soon as you enter that first pull, or once you kill the boss and jump down, you can grab it again. So that is here for those Necrolord players out there, just in case you have missed it or just have never noticed, or like, oh, cool design of that random banner there. So we're gonna continue pulling this forward. I'm not proud of this next pull. So Egg is like, do you want to pull the whole hallway? I have Ashen Hollow. And in my head, I was like, we have Ashen Hollow. We're never gonna die. We feed so many deaths here, it's ridiculous. So we're waiting. We're kind of just making sure everyone's here. We got the misdirect. I'm gonna roar out. I'm gonna try to get all the way down to the end of the hallway. I tag that very far mob. I'm gonna pop Incarn, Survival Instincts. I'm gonna thrash to try to get some absorbs. I get a lay on hands, beacons on me, and Egg instantly gets killed through sack. So he used Ashen Hollow, sacked me, died, And then this is where Sakai gets one shot. I think then Dave gets one shot, and then Zev gets one shot, and then they all run back in, and then it's like this domino chain effect, just Russian roulette style, knocking everyone out. So Dave dies, Zev dies, Sakai dies again. Eggs here. He's holding on a bubble. I think he's playing an LOS game behind me. That's why he's not dying. I use shell. He peeks his head out for a second, gets one shot. Dave runs in, dies again. Don't do this. Don't do this. I'm not proud of this. And this is, I guess, an example of how to throw a key. So the reason you don't pull these is because these mobs, while they do a lot of damage, but not in the way you think they would. They actually typically don't auto. They do a random cast called Bind Soul, and they do random like bolts. So what this means is that they're not going to really be targeting the tank. They're going to target anyone who's in LOS, anyone who's within line of sight. So if you have, Egg at the very start was in line of sight, got one shot. Dave was in the very, in line of sight. Eventually they were all in line of sight and all got one shot. So that's why I dipped so low when I was solo pulling them, is because they only had me to target, and there's like, 10 of them or whatever. And then later on, the less players who are in the pool means the higher chance one player is going to be targeted by the same ability and just die. So we were kind of joking around here. Just, it was a 5-head strat because now we didn't have to use battle reses because we were close to the res point. It's worth if you can get it all down, even with the 10 deaths. It's not. Don't do that. What I typically do is I split that in half. I pull the first half back, and then the next pull we all run forward together and line of sight into this area that we're in now at the top of the stairs. These Portal Guardians act in a very similar way to Prideful, but instead of being pulsing damage, it's every time they cast Soulstorm. There is a curse that goes out from these mobs. It's going to be on the party frames. You can see it here as well. This curse just makes them take more shadow damage, which is the Soulstorm that they cast. So if you can decurse it, do it. As a Druid, you can. You're not really doing much else once you have your Moonfire and your Thrashes up, so feel free to throw out a curse spell here. I'm going to get him eventually, I think, when the Soulstorm comes out. Maybe I don't. Maybe I just leave it on him. I typically try to dispel it, though, if it's ever on someone. And then again, we're going to go right back into... This is where we're going to get Prideful. This Prideful is going to last us the next 2 platforms. So depending on your route, we're at 80% here. We typically go right and then left, and then that's it. We typically go right, left. Some groups like to go right because of the trash is a little bit easier in pugs. But if you have a coordinated group and or a curse to spell for left platform, second left platform, it's pretty easy to get down. For whatever reason you don't have Prideful here because you missed something, you don't have to go back. You can just go left instead. Left gives you like the tiniest bit more percent for some reason, because just how the mob count works. So it's just a way to fix the route on the fly. Darkness goes down there to help save us because we're a little spent on cooldowns. We just have Aura Mastery up now, and this pack's going to go down. Except we just know that instead of going to the left because we were a little bit lower on... We felt like we were lower on percent. We actually just pulled 1 Shackled Soul, which was like such a waste of time. We used Prideful on 1 Shackled Soul, so not worth. This is a wing that we definitely messed up. Not proud of. The key was still timed. Don't worry, you guys are watching a timed key, but it was a goofy midsection for sure. So I've said don't click, Dave clicks. Make sure your tank goes first. Tanks, make sure you go first. What you can do there is you can, if you're Alliance, what I did is I shadow melded, because Dave went through. He's like, oh shit, I melded, or I went through. I said live, I melded, and then I went through to get aggro and help with kicks. Only one person from Spiteful will ever be targeted, and that person is the only person who will be in combat until someone else hits it or heals him, the person being targeted. So in that case, it might have been targeting Zev. That means all of us would have been able to go through, and then Zev would have just had to wait. But what we typically like to do is just have everyone wait, so then we can all go through together to make sure no one's going to get like randomly one shot, like we saw in the last hallway, because there's less people there for line of sight. Less people there means a higher chance for double Bone Spear to go off on the same player, which means results in a higher chance of people just going splat. So just kind of things like that, like logically thinking through, just don't ever go to a platform by yourself. This next pull we're going to end up using big cooldowns on. Tank, what I always recommend is this Soulbinder. My auto marker always marks them with orange. What I do is I set focus, and you wait for the volley. The Necrotic Bolt, honestly, Frenzied Regen should be able to heal through pretty easily, or any other healing cooldown. So just what I do is I set focus him to make sure I'm getting kick on the Necrotic Bolt volley. And what we do is we blow up the Magus. Magus is typically always going to be the priority because of how potent Bone Spear is. I think at a 20, this might not, I mean, obviously for lower levels it won't be as true, but for Bone Spear will one-shot someone, I think, at like a 17 or 18, depending on obviously stat distributions. Like if you have high verse, probably not. But if you're a class who prefers lower versatility or no verse, or it's just like a high enough key, Bone Spear will one-shot. So making sure the Magus dies first, followed by the Soulbinder is typically the priority, and this Portal Guardian, it's a lot of damage, but it's never going to one-shot someone. Like the healer, if the healer's playing well and, you know, people are using their cooldowns and their potions defensively, should be able to survive a Soulstorm. So the biggest thing that's going on here, though, is the Spiteful spawning on top of that. So the melee of the Spiteful with the Soulstorm can get deadly, but again, on most weeks, you don't really have to worry about this. Another week that could provide a detriment is like things like bursting. So when a mob dies and Soulstorm's going out, and then all of a sudden you have bursting on top of that, could be pretty scary. So now what we're doing, like I said before, we're going to the left side. The left side has two of the guys who cast the Death Speakers, I think they're called. They cast like the Death Winds and the Curses. Why we go this way is because percentage. I don't really have an answer. The Bone Storm and stuff like that, and all the different Bone Spikes and the Bone Maguses on the other platform. Again, like I said, if two of those Bone Spears line up on the same player and you lose someone, it creates a higher chance your group is going to wipe in that kind of scenario. So Death Winds, avoidable. Curse, avoidable. Spirit Frost is a randomly targeted cast. It does a very light magical damage. Honestly, because of that, if the tank dies for whatever reason, or if I get knocked off the platform because I'm not paying attention, my group can actually live this pull because no one actually has to tank these mobs. It's all just about damage and dodging. So this platform is a little bit more of a skill check when it comes to positioning, where the other platform is like a DPS check. And because we just use cooldowns on the last pull, we don't have anything here. So we come to this platform because our steady single target damage and our abilities as players to just dodge mechanics in general makes it so it's an easier time getting through this platform, getting the percent we need, and having just a cleaner run overall. The other thing about this platform is if you do want to do like the strategy where you pull and side trash because you're skipping other parts of the dungeon, this platform has easier trash pulls than the other platform as well. So just a couple notes. There are a couple of those Soulbinder dudes, so you got to be careful. But outside of that, pretty easy platform to take care of. And now we're running up to the last platform, and that'll give us our 100% trash. We'll get Prideful, we'll go to the last two bosses, and we have roughly 9 minutes left. So we're looking pretty good on time. It's going to still be a little tight, but nothing to be on the edge of your seat about. So we're still comfortable here. We just know that we make it through this trash bowl, we're fine. We have Wild Spirits, we have Zuen up again. We don't have Metamorphosis, but we'll have it for boss, we'll have it for next boss, and then we'll have it for the final boss if we need it. So again, big goal here. Same as the other pull. Set focus of the Soulbinder, kick the volley, and then make sure you are targeting, just dodging the Death Winds and cleaving down the Dark Speaker. This platform is super sketchy on Prideful because of how tight it is, how small it is. One thing that I noticed when I was rewatching this is that we didn't effectively use our Ring of Peace should have been used here. So what happened is that Sakai had it. He had the curse. So what he was doing is he was running around the edge. You could see where he dropped the curse here. His next drop would have been here. But the Spiteful mob was in kind of an awkward position where he was able to get meleeed. So if we Ring of Peaced him this way, it would have been fine, right? But we didn't Ring of Peace. It was available, but it was just a common mistake. Obviously, super sketchy platform. Things happen because we threw so many deaths earlier and were able to run back. We still had all our battle reses. So we just got a battle res quickly on Sakai because Prideful was coming up. Last Dark Speaker goes down. It was baited somehow into the corner of the platform. Binding Shot, Fell Eruption, Mass Root, all in place. And we're pretty much set for the rest of the dungeon just to cruise. This dungeon on Fortified Week is, I think, obviously easier. Almost every dungeon's easier on Fortified Week. But if you're sitting with still on, essentially hitting that two chest still time, going up to the last boss, you're probably in a pretty good spot. So big thing is just making sure you're playing clean with your cooldowns, using cooldowns on cooldown on effective pulls. That's what I like about Theater is it has a really good pace when you're kind of pushing through like this, is that all of the pulls you need cooldowns on, it's going to be up for. As long as you're not, throwing deaths out the window. So we're heading up to our last platform. We're kind of chilling. You can obviously see me just hanging out, itching my nose. And going into Koltharok. Koltharok's a scary boss because it does do a lot of group damage, and if your healer doesn't have cooldowns from that last Prideful, it can get scary. But like I said again, there is a window here on this fight, just like back on Zav, the Unfallen, that you're able to actually fill a lot of windows with just globals of rejuves and wild growths if you're running the Resto Affinity as a Guardian Druid. So the big thing here is so these hands just disappeared. I don't know if you guys saw that, but that was like that. I noticed this when we were doing this fight, is that sometimes this fight's kind of buggy. Is that like these hands spawned here, as you can see, right? I circled them, and they for some reason just disappear. So I don't know why that is, but it seems like it's a bug that I've seen actually quite frequently on this fight. So DPS just need to be aware of what's going on. We both stack up on the other hands on the other side of the room, pick up our spirits, and just in case you guys didn't know, this does give you a pretty good damage buff once you pick up your spirit for 30 seconds, or for not 30 seconds, but for a few seconds. I think it's a 30% damage, or I think it's just flat damage buff. It might be crit. I tank, so I don't know, but it gives you a damage buff once you stand in the hands and pick up your soul. So this boss is going to go down pretty quickly. What I like to do here is I like to use my Incarnation on this pull. I go through Incarnation, the 30 seconds of it, and then once Incarnation is done, I'll start using my own healing to help out the healer. So Draw Soul comes out here. You'll see me rejuve, and then pop a Wild Growth, and then I popped a Swift Mend on Zev to keep him alive. And I'm going to do this every time. So you'll always have enough room in the rotation. Is as soon as he casts Draw Soul, you rejuve, Wild Growth, Swift Mend, Bear Form. Every time. And you're going to be able to top someone off who's pretty low. Sometimes, your healer has to focus on, they have to make a choice, right? Okay, who do I heal? And sometimes your healer might not be as well versed in the knowledge of every class and what cooldowns they might have. So being able to help out the person that they're not healing is going to be pretty beneficial. So right now, like, I see that Dave is low, but Zev's healthy. I see that Sakai still has Exhilaration, so I know that Dave is going to need healing. So Wild Growth, and then I Swift Mend Dave, and he's topped off, and we're ready to go. So just having knowledge of what cooldowns players have is something that you should pay attention to, and I really give a shout out to OmniCD for providing that kind of information. So I'll have to do a spotlight video on this. I've been planning to for a long time, but I just never do. So 5 minutes heading up to the last boss puts us in a pretty good spot. Not the fastest run in the world, don't get me wrong. Definitely not the cleanest run. It felt really clean, but it wasn't clean because of how many deaths we had. But a lot of those deaths came from like one specific pull. And I blame Egg for telling me he had Ashen Hollow up. If I didn't know Ashen Hollow was up, I wouldn't have pulled all of it. So thanks, Egg. A little bit of RP here. Sometimes you can have someone leave the fight early to go and start RP. You can have like someone who's able to make it all the way off the platform to go up as soon as the boss is about to die to get a little bit head start on the RP. But honestly, sometimes there's just nothing you can do about it. It's gonna burn anywhere from like 40 from when you kill Koltharok to heading up or whatever last boss. It'll typically be about a minute of downtime. So right now we're about to hit that 4-minute mark, and I'm able to pull her. I actually have a boss guide for her recording, so I don't want to spend too much time, but I'll be posting that as well shortly after this video. So this is a very fun boss. I love this boss. It's a great final boss of an instance that's kind of boss heavy. It's the only dungeon right now currently available that has 5 bosses. Obviously the new mega dungeon is going to have 8, but that'll be split into 2 in 9.1. So probably going to always be the only dungeon with 5 bosses. But really good fight design, really good build up to the end. Big fan of this fight. The big thing here though is that what a lot of people don't know is that a lot of the damage is actually going to come from these rifts and these ads spawning. So there are a lot of one-shot mechanics which are avoidable, but a lot of the damage you need to use your immunities for, your defenses for, are going to come down to, obviously tanks need to pay attention to Reaping Scythe, but that rift with the ads is going to be pretty big damage. And then Echoes of Carnage obviously does a little bit of burst to the group, but it's never worth actually committing a cooldown for. So here you're just going to watch your feats. You have to be always keeping in mind that you have melee. If you have melee in your group, you have to keep that in mind always. Don't just move to where you're out of the swirls, but try to position the boss into a point where the melee can always have uptime, or have as high of uptime as possible on the boss to maintain that DPS. So this overlap, if you guys actually care to watch my content, but if you ever watch my Mordratha video, which again will be coming out shortly, this is the scariest overlap. It's going to be a manifest, it's going to be contenders, it's going to be the ad spawn plus rift. Like it's so much going on here that this is where you just need to live. So like things like aura mastery and things like personal defensives are going to make this part of the fight really easy. And if you can make it past that part of the fight right there, you're probably set to finish the instance. Lastly, we have a weird spawn of charge. This one's a little bit more uncommon, I find. I've never noticed a set pattern of them, but it seems like 80% of the time these mobs go across. But in this instance, they're going to come like in a, I don't know, whatever this pattern would be, out in parallel to each other. So you just have to be careful to dodge. And then essentially at this point, it's just kill the boss. Nothing else really overlaps. Like, we're going to get a Reaping Scythe plus the contenders, but that's really a tank issue. The Rift, but the Rift's not going to have any ads. And then after the Rift, it's going to be, I think, a Reaping Scythe or a Dark Dev, or no, Charge followed by Dark Dev. So pretty easy end of the fight. So Charge is going to come across here. Simply just keep the boss kind of in this center ring and dodge Dark Dev. And the fight kind of keeps going in these like weird patterns. But making it a 2-minute fight, going to be pretty quick. So pretty easy key for us. Not too shabby. Definitely not the cleanest run, but I think it's a good parallel to what most pugs do. So if you're a tank or a player who likes to pug, I hope this guide helps, or not guide. What am I talking about? I hope this commentary actually helps you in some kind of way. I hope it provided with some insightful information. If you do have any questions about anything in the run, or why we do certain things, or maybe some suggestions for my run, I'd love to hear them in the comment section below. I do plan on doing some boss guides in the future. My work schedule is starting to slow down, fingers crossed, a little bit. So I'm hoping that gives me more time to start making more content again. So pretty excited for that. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I will catch you all in the next one. Take care.